Doctrine has stayed, they have moved from minimal credible deterrence to full-scale nuclear deterrence around 2014, 2015. In 2015, General Khalid Kidwai, who was the chairman of Pakistan's Strategic Planning Division for 15 years, in a Washington, D.C. think tank Carnegie Endowment meeting, openly threatened India with first use. And that first use was predicated not only about bilateral issues, but issue of Kashmir. Very surprisingly, Pakistan's perceived loss of strategic destiny in Afghanistan. Now, in view of these extraterritorial considerations by our next door neighbor, would we still be sticking to credible minimal deterrence or go to maybe limited deterrence or moderate deterrence?
You want me to answer?
Yes. So we are having a discussion.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I mean, if you have to ask me, these kind of statements, they have been. This is not something new. It has been coming up. This has been quite common. But this escalation, if you see, I mean, there are several layers between the conventional level and the nuclear level. There are several layers. It just does not, happen. It just does not escalate like that. And I can substantiate my statement by saying that they talked about escalation during the Kargil crisis. We did not really see that. In 2001, 2002 Operation Parakram, it was worse. They talked about threats, they talked about escalation even then. We have seen 2016, and of course, of late 2019, when India had actually, crossed into their territory, the other side of LOC. These threats, they have been holding for escalation. They have been stating these, making these statements. The escalation, I don't think it is. I would not say that they're trying to bluff. I will not say that. But where is the tangible evidence here that they have really carried out their threats? As I said, there are several layers. Those layers have to be breached before you really reach that, nuclear, the crisis level as such. In all these instances, we have not really, and they are they were severe crises, and it spoke about crisis instability. It actually denoted crisis instability in all these cases. It was not so much about deterrence instability, but it was certainly crisis instability. But where has that, they have been able to really carry out their, nuclear threat as such? That's one way of looking at it. The other thing is, the other way that we can, essentially, again, add to this is these kind of, postures. It's not really helping the situation. You're not bringing about stability. You're not helping in, maintaining the strategic restraint as such, because obviously, by the laws of physics, every action will have a reaction. You will have some statements from the other side that will be, again, countered with statements from experts and authoritative, figures from the other side. But this is not really helping so-called, strategic restraint as such. What I would really, think is essential here is dialogue. If you have so much of Pakistan actually does not believe in India's no first use policy. And even on the ground of massive retaliation, there are so many questions on that as well. What do you mean by massive? How much pain is Pakistan going to really endure before massive really becomes massive? So there are a lot of questions on this. I think these issues, these ambiguities can be addressed if there is proper dialogue. That would really make because I believe if you have a revision now, there has been a lot of, like as you're saying, can we really hold on to these postures? Which means, in a way, you're suggesting, should we revise them? The thing is, if we revise it, if we revise massive retaliation now, we will not have it credible in front of China. It'll no longer remain credible in front of China, and more so, even in the case of Pakistan, they will also not find it credible enough. So we have held on to our posture. We have held on to our, the doctrinal, the postures that we have made it very clear, categorically clear in our doctrine. We have held on to it, and despite the pressure, despite from both sides, from the other side of the border as well as from within our country, despite the pressures, we have not really, gone in for major revision as such. So yeah, I would like to suggest it, address it this way. Dialogue is important.
I think that is very well stated. Uh, Considering the fact that reach of the nuclear weapons is global, and it's not just Pakistan that has a strategic threat to India, there are threats coming from other quarters also. So if we look at the history, former Soviet Union at one point in time had a no first use doctrine. And around 1994, the successor state gave up the no first use doctrine and went to first use, doctrine. So on the northern side, China started with the no first use doctrine, and there are serious issues there. Most of the strategic analysts feel that China's no first use doctrine is unverifiable, lacks sincerity, and over a period of time it has been diluted to the fact that in 2013, in the China's annual defense report, the word no first use doctrine was dropped from it. And then subsequently that was noticed, commented upon, and they brought it back. And there's a lot of internal dialogue going on in China, whether we keep the no first use doctrine or not. And also there are, scenarios where they are saying they may not stick to the no first use doctrine. Should that concern us in India?
Well, any change in our strategic environment, the security aspects of it would definitely be something which we have to look into. We have to revisit. That is what the entire doctrine is all about. It's understandable that we have a doctrine which is enduring. The 1999 doctrine itself, even though it was draft doctrine, and it was not considered to be a settled issue, as I pointed out earlier. But nonetheless, it has been an enduring doctrine, and the 2003 doctrine has also taken much of it from it. So, in that sense, to answer your question, any change in our security environment definitely, would require, it becomes very imperative for us that we factor in what is going on around us from the China side or from, our external environment as such. In fact, that is what the credible minimum deterrence also talks about, the very fact that it's a dynamic concept. We have not fixated there. We have to, respond according to our security environment. So in that case, if such changes happens, then obviously there has to be, the concerned policymakers, the concerned stakeholders from the political level, even from the defense sector, we all need to take a relook at it. But at this point of time, I would say that, it's military confrontation is not the demand of the day. It is more economic competition. So I know I'm sounding probably quite diplomatic there, but that's the essence of it. Like how does it? I mean, we are talking about a first use. What do you get out of the first use, honestly? I mean, like, does it give you really that guarantee that yes, I go and carry out my strike and there is no consequences? Is there any guarantee that there will be no consequences for me? So there is, it really does not give you a guaranteed situation. And the very fact that you carry out a first act, and then, that is in your, it's playing in your mind, there could be retaliation. Will you have the stomach to really, kind of accept it, that there will be a, there can be a counter retaliation? One can say that, yes, the first use, you can annihilate, you can really neutralize your adversary. But this is an age of technological advancement, which has gone really, it's spiraled up. It's how they would require a lot of intelligence, a lot of, communication channels, as to exactly know where your adversaries, the strategic assets are. And that's a really challenging thing. So to carry out a first strike and feel very happy about it, that yes, there will be no consequence, especially when your adversary, has a no first use policy, which means there is an assured retaliation coming up, your way, and it's assured, as I said. So that's one way of looking at it. The other thing, as I said, how does it help China to get into nuclear confrontation? Of all, nuclear confrontation with India. I mean, we can see the situation right now. We've just had this joint, statement that has come up. Both India and China, they have managed the issue. I mean, they have managed the issue. It could have, this has been going on for a long while. But at the end of the day, they have been able to manage the issue, because it really holds no ground for China to, get into any kind of military confrontation, leave alone, nuclear confrontation. When you have, India is actually a huge economic bloc, emerging economic bloc, in the current, phase. So it really, it would be very, it would be a folly. I would rather say that.
I get your point, and you very well said. The issues are much more nuanced. It's not just no first use and first use. There are other declaratory positions, and bringing back China into. China started with their nuclear options, actually officially in 1955, when they decided to go nuclear, but actually went nuclear in 1964. And they had their first use policy. They started with minimal critical deterrence, and they moved to limited deterrence and then moderate deterrence. And at this point in time, if you talk to Chinese scientists or strategic experts in various think tank meetings, now their posture has informally changed, although they will protest officially. They are seeking parity with the two superpowers. And their stance is that till we have parity in numbers, either the superpowers reduce their numbers, we will continue to quote unquote modernize our weapon forces and delivery systems. So if China is going to a maximalist position, should we not take that into consideration in modifying or revising the NFU doctrine?
As I said, this is continuation of what I said. If earlier, that is, NFU policy. I mean, why do we need it? Why do we essentially need it? Because it holds a lot of strategic ground for us. I mean, see the international image that we have, achieved because of our restraint policy. Come to think of it, since 1991 till 2000, India has faced a nuclear threat 16 times. Pakistan has been raining down with their nuclear threats, I think, with all due respect, but this has been so common. But India has still, held ground. It has not really, crossed that level where, and our doctrine says it very clearly, we do not have to match, warhead to warhead, delivery weapon to delivery weapon, missile to missile. We really need not do that. Come to think of North Korea. I mean, it's such a small power in relation to the United States, or for that matter, the other, P5 countries. Is it possible for North Korea to match the United States? It's not. But somewhere, this is what the beauty of deterrence relationship is, that you are able to, hold it out, that if there is any kind of nuclear offense directed against me, then these are the consequences that will follow up. And that is enough even for the United States, to not really I mean, United States and North Korea, they are at the negotiating table. They are talking about it, about the whole issue of nuclear disarmament. They're at least, talking. There is face-to-face communication on that. So it's not matching warhead to warhead, matching delivery vehicles, your force structure with the force structure of your adversary. That is not what we are seeking here. We are not into any war fighting. Our philosophy does not dictate any war fighting philosophy. We have a philosophy where nuclear weapons are essentially treated as a political weapon, and no first use policy is an essence of that. It is to be used as a last, method of maximalist force, if I can say it, but then as a last measure. Yes, you're right that. There are certain, observations that have been, it's noticeable on the Chinese nuclear front, but that is where the dialogue is necessary. If we can have, a nuclear security summit where, more than I think the last summit had almost 60, if not more, participants, where countries like United States, Russia, all these, they have their differing positions on the nuclear issues, and yet they were able to, gather as part of this summit process. 4 such summit processes were held from 2010 to 2016, and they contributed, towards world's nuclear security, which has enormous implications for the non-proliferation regime and even for nuclear disarmament as such. So why is it not possible that, initiatives are taken, and that conducive environment is created, where you can have a regional nuclear security summit process within South Asia, or for that matter, even, like on other nuclear issues, where we can have a trilateral, like a forum where the 3 important, and in fact the only 3 states with nuclear weapons capability, and of course China, a nuclear weapon state, where you can get together and have this, kind of forum, a mechanism can be developed, where you essentially can come up with important confidence building measures. That really helps the situation.
So very well said, but I'm going to take it from there that, you said that dialogue is very important. Now, a logical extension of this would be that India and China enter into maybe a bilateral NFU pact, just bilateral between India and China. Apart from track 2 interactions, officially China refuses to indulge in any kind of nuclear dialogue with India, saying that you are, quote unquote, not the holier than thou NPT5 nuclear states. So how do you develop confidence building measures and dialogue when your strategic adversary is not willing to talk to you and continues to quote unquote modernize? And actually the estimates, if you look at the Department of Defense Pentagon report, they are now saying that in next 10 years, China will double its nuclear weapons warheads. But if you look at the Russian estimates, and if you look at Taiwanese estimates, they say that, the United States has been under counting, Chinese weapons, warheads, and missiles. And in fact, China may have many, many times more than what is publicly stated. China's nuclear posture is opaque, officially opaque, and they take pride in saying that we are opaque, we are not going to disclose, while we continue to modernize, while we preach to you. So it's a very difficult situation when an adversary will not enter into a dialogue. So the logical thing would have been a bilateral, mutual, no first use, pact with China. Now, short of that, is there need for maybe a multilateral NFU treaty?
A multilateral NFU treaty, this has been something which, was kind of suggested by India, time and again, that there is a need for a global NFU, where all the nuclear weapon states, particularly the nuclear weapon states, as well as the states with nuclear weapons capability, both categories, they must adhere to this policy, because that would itself, be a huge contributing factor in reducing the salience on nuclear weapons. Now, but then this has, unfortunately, this has not been kind of acceptable globally. United States, has its first use policy. So does it goes for the, except for China and India. We know all the other states, all the other nuclear weapon states, as well as the states with nuclear weapons capability, they adhere to, a completely different posture. Now, your point, very well taken. It has been, part of China's policy stand to, well, it's an arms race, you can say, that is going on between China and the United States, and that is why we have so much of uh, kind of concern over arms control measures. The very fact that arms control itself, the future of arms control is so much, nuclear arms control is so much in you can say, uncertainty, is essentially because one important, factor in this whole picture, that is China itself is not cooperating enough, and that kind of exudes a lot of fear on that, a lot of concern on that. Coming to India and China, yes, a bilateral, kind of mechanism on the no first use policy, that would be really helpful, and it would make more sense to have Pakistan also, to be a part of it, because these are the three important states with nuclear weapons capability in this part of the world. But we know that there were suggestions for a nuclear weapon free zone here in this part of the world, but it was turned down. Even India has its own points, it had to it had its position was such that this nuclear weapon free zones could not work out. China also has its own position, because it does not recognize India in the first place as a state with nuclear weapons capability. Now, what can be done? Because when the two strategic, components here, they are like on the two sides of the spectrum, and they are not willing to talk to each other. They are not willing to, initiate dialogue on this process. What can be done? I think what at this stage, can help, rather, is at a track two level. When you have events like this, or when you have scholars who are meeting maybe on neutral ground, like whether from India or from Pakistan, or even Chinese, you have these regional, events, that is the RCSS, which is in Colombo, where these scholars are meeting up over a period of, 2 weeks. I have been myself, part of one such, forum, RCSS forum, where all these scholars are meeting up, and they are discussing threadbare, on various issues on the nuclear front, and they are carrying back this, the essence of it, the dialogue that we are having at this level, at the track two level. We are carrying it back to our respective countries. That's one way of, influencing the narrative once you are back home, through your academic pursuits, or even at a university level, or through your writings. The think tanks, very important role that these centers can play in terms of initiating this dialogue at a track two level. The think tanks has a huge role to play there, but of course, there are certain limitations in terms of the, the government rules, regulations that have to be also taken into account. Given all that, with all, you cannot really bypass protocols. But as I said, at a track two level, these initiatives can be taken. Universities itself, they are apolitical centers rather. You can have fair discussions there about the need, in terms of educating the new generation about the follies, about the dangers, about the risks that are associated with, like nuclear issues, nuclear war as such. The new generation needs to be more educated on this, and more track to level, engagements, such engagements, such events. I'm sure they will make an impact on the discourse, on the narrative. Probably that can influence at a later stage. We can be optimistic on that.
Thank you very much. We are running short of time, so I'll just have one last comment and then we'll open to question and answers from the audience. You very well brought actually United States into the picture. Just for the audience, we were threatened by United States in 1971 when we were non-nuclear state, and United States sent actually Enterprise 7th Fleet, which was nuclear armed, to pressure us in bilateral war with Pakistan at that point in time, at the time of Bangladesh liberation. So, as I said, nuclear weapons have a global reach, and we have been threatened by more than one countries at various time points in time in recent times. Coming to United States, which has first use policy, at the time of election of President Obama, there was a lot of progressive thinking, and United States toyed with the idea of adopting a no first use policy. And there was a vehement opposition from the conservative, traditionalist, and military hawkist internal elements. But also there was response from NATO, response from Japan, who did not want United States to abandon the NFU policy because they have this extended nuclear deterrence umbrella from United States. So over the 8 years of Obama administration, they talked and they moved from, first use, no first use, what they should do. They did not take any action, but they did consider what is called sole purpose declaration, but they did not adopt it. And in 2020 elections, Joe Biden's platform did mention sole purpose declaration. Now, I was saying that the issues are not so binary, first use versus no first use. And there are examples that USSR moved from first use, no first use, back to first use. China started with NFU and has a very diluted and modified NFU. If at all, you can consider Chinese word for it because there are doubts about Chinese words. They always violate international treaties. US is at this point in time considering possible change from first use policy to sole purpose declaration. Now, since India is facing the same challenges, your one nuclear adversary has first use policy, which is India centric, has moved away from minimal credible deterrence to full scale nuclear deterrence. The other adversary is continuing to dilute, their no first use doctrine and is thinking about, should India move away from NFU to sole purpose declaration? We are not able to hear you.
So, Dr. Adityanji, you are right. There is a lot of discussion. There is a lot of suggestions and pressure from the domestic quarter, given the fact that Pakistan has a policy which is India centric, and now that it has moved towards full spectrum deterrence, there are certain changes which are coming up. But as I again, said that despite the pressure that has been there on India, both from the external front as well as from internally, India has not really it has refused to accede to these situations, in the sense that there has been no revision on the no first use policy, because Given the fact that yes, Pakistan has an India-centric program and its postures a full spectrum deterrence. Any revision in Pakistan, in India's stance, can only come about if there is if there is such a situation which is posing an existential crisis to India. And at this juncture, India has not really, there is no debate, there is no discussion within the domestic circles that we are facing any kind of existential threat to our existence. And in that case, there is no radical change, within our security environment that is kind of, that should allow us, to make this radical shift from a no first use policy, which has given us not only it, like a moral standing, but also the very fact that it poses so much of strategic restraint. It holds so much of strategic stability, even in times of crisis. I mean, we really have no reason to, make a major shift from our position, at least not at this stage. Not at this stage.
Thank you very much, Professor Kazi. Now we will take actually questions from the audience that are actually sent by text function to Ripudaman, the host of the meeting.
Sure, thank you, Adityanji. There are a lot of questions coming in chat, and a lot of questions were raised by Mr. Saptrishi Bas. Saptrishi, like if you like, you can ask your question yourself if you're hearing.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kazi and Dr. Aditya ji for this enlightening discussion. But I have a position which I would like to state, and I would request the speaker to counter me if she feels that the position is incorrect. First of all, I don't understand, and we have two extreme hawkish powers in the geopolitical arena of the Indian subcontinent in a nuclear triumvirate. How does India's strategic restraint give nuclear stability? That is what I cannot understand. That is number one. Second question is it a strategic restraint or strategic constraint? Point number three, Pakistan is the fastest developing nuclear power in the world at present, with more than 600 nuclear weapons, out of which 300 of them are in the tactical nuclear arena with short range delivery and with devolution of command right to the field commander level. Now, point number four, China has hardening, which they will call the willfully as the second wall of China, probably known best to as nuclear hardened bunkers extending with strategic assets like bombers.
Saptrishi, we cannot hear you. Can you repeat the last part about the question? Okay, I think Dr. Kazi, we can. Okay, he's back. Mr. Basu, you were not audible. Yeah, can you repeat last part of your question, please?
Yeah, I'll repeat that. Question was like China has built what is known as the second wall of China with blast walls. It's a nuclear bunker hardened state facility with strategic assets as well as long range bombers, fourth generation fighters, and nuclear artillery. And the stated number of weapon arsenal is more than 3,000, out of which China has hypersonic missiles with a circular precision of less than 50 meters, I would say, and the capability in the final stage in order to avoid, let us say, ballistic missile defense shield. Russia today is developing similar technologies and hypersonic missiles today, which can basically defeat any BMDs, which we have still not fully encompassed. Like even Israel had a few of these Scud missiles coming down on them before the Iron Dome got installed. So, is this really viable? And last of my point, the new no first use policy is not a utopian ideology. It means separation of three things: launcher, warhead, and platform. That is the vehicle. You have a flight period of 45 seconds from Rawalpindi to New Delhi. You have a flight period of 2.5 minutes from, let us say, nearest launching station somewhere in Arunachal Pradesh, Lhasa, inner let us say Yunnan provinces, as well as central China, to let us say all the centers of military headquarters in India that can target our C4I2, rather than the C3 concept which we are talking about. Under this condition of nuclear overhang, is our policy viable?
Stop at this juncture. You are giving a lecture. Let the distinguished speaker respond. Please don't give a lecture.
Okay, Dr. Kazi, please go ahead. And I think the question was clear. You can go ahead and answer first two questions, please. Thank you.
Okay, very quickly, no first use policy is definitely not any utopian ideology. In fact, I believe it is deeply entrenched. The essence of it is deeply entrenched in realism, because the message is very clear. It talks about assured retaliation under certain conditions. Now, again, as I pointed out, if you're talking about war-fighting hawkish policy from the China front and the Pakistan front, that's all understood. We have discussed all that. The thing is, our policy, our nuclear doctrine policy, we are not talking about any war-fighting posture. Our deterrence policy does not. That is the philosophy of our deterrence posture, that we are not talking about any war-fighting philosophy, or we do not have any war-fighting targeting philosophy as such. So yes, there are new developments that have taken place: hypersonic missiles, you have TNWs, you have dual use, like technologies that have come up, which has really complicated the situation. There are huge concerns over that. This is where all the criticism and the huge amount of the concerns that are emerging from. But at the same time, what is important here is that instead of propagating a kind of active deterrence, which will be bordering more on a warfighting philosophy, the emphasis out here is on a dissuasive deterrence, where essentially the objective is to dissuade your adversary from resorting to any kind of nuclear offensive posture. Because if that happens, then in the first place the deterrence breaks down. And if the deterrence is breaking down, then like if you're talking about deterrence, we're talking about retaliation. What is the point of talking about at the same time war fighting philosophy, or moving towards on the other side of the spectrum, which is more in the war active operational front in terms of war fighting, because then deterrence essentially does not stay. There is failure of deterrence that is taking place in the to be very honest, and that is not what we are talking about. We are talking about a no first use policy, which is actually holding that deterrence in terms of threat. The retaliation that is talking, that we are our doctrine essentially talks about, is essentially it is holding out a threat, and the threat has to be credible enough. it is credible enough. We believe that it is credible enough because that is how, despite the Kargil, we have seen the Kargil situation, we have seen the Operation Parakram situation, we have seen 2016 and again 2019. The deterrence has been there in place. It has been successful so far.
All right, thank you. Next person, I see a couple of people. Anyone would like to ask question? Please raise your hand. I have. Otherwise, I'll just call the names, and if you have any question, you can ask. Otherwise, I'll ask question. So, Mr. Ajay Singh, Ajay ji, welcome. Do you have any question?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Desai.
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Manoj Talwar.
Hi, it's Manoj. I've typed my question. My question is, how do we ensure that non-nuclear countries do not get into the nuclear arms race? Because we have seen that behavior in many countries. Thanks.
Yes, that's a great question. In fact, how do we not get into the arms race? Well, I guess we have.
Or should we get into arms race or not?
Get into the arms race.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it certainly does not make, there is a saying, the more the merrier. But in this case, I cannot say that, like the more the merrier. It's not, certainly not so. It would be very depressing. It would not be something which will be, in the interest of the international community, in the interest of or global interest as such. So how do we keep out of it? Well, I think we should give arms control chance. So there's so much of debate and discussions that is coming up. We should be influencing the narrative, the discourse. It should build up pressure on the nuclear weapon states of how important it is, for particularly, the future generations, that these countries, the nuclear weapon states, as well as the other states, with nuclear weapons capability, including India and Pakistan, and for all Iran, is also with the way things are shaping up. For all that's the next nuclear entrant. But yes, it would certainly not be in the interest of neighboring countries. It's certainly not in the interest of India to have another nuclear weapon state or state with nuclear weapons capability adding to the fray. So we can influence the debate. We can build up the pressure that the nuclear weapon states, they need to play a much more responsible role, a much more a role which is it's hinges upon, it's very much conditioned upon strategic restraint. We do not want anything like a Cuban Missile Crisis, which happened. It was a close call. The world would have been very different if something like that had happened. And even between, on the India-Pakistan side, yes, there are concerns, but the very fact these nuclear threats, these nuclear, lack of nuclear dialogue, comprehensive, adequate, substantial dialogue between India and Pakistan, or for that matter, India and China, and again at the trilateral level, this really does not help the situation. But what we can do is that influence the narrative, influence the discourse through our writings, through our academic pursuits, showing more interest in the subject. I think that can be one way of doing the role play in rather limiting vertical as well as horizontal proliferation.
Thanks, Dr. Kazi. Yeah. You mentioned about Iran and Cuban crisis. Would just quickly like your comment on Turkey and North Korea as well. They're getting into the arms race.
Well, again, The new entrants, a country like North Korea, it has already, like achieved the nuclear target, but it's a new nuclear nation. So, nothing much. It has not had years of experience, unlike the, Cold War competitors who had, like these two nations have had years of experience. They know how to deal with their strategic assets, and even then there have been numerous examples where accidental, like, or near accidental launches have been, there has been close call. Cuban Missile Crisis is one. There have been also cases where, like a bomber has flown loaded or mated, missiles for over hours. So these kind of negligence has taken place. So the very fact that the new nuclear nations lack experience in terms of their command and control structure, that has its own, dangers, its own risks, because we also have the issue of nuclear terrorism. There are certain non-state actors that are looking for these, these deadly weapons. And obviously, you can be sure that they have some very, dangerous intentions in mind. They are not certainly going to return them back if they get hold of it. So it's a difficult, scenario in that sense. So there should be enough adequate efforts. The discourse should be much more, strongly, reaching out to the people. There has to be adequate outreach. And I think, I keep on telling my students, particularly my female, like women scholars in my university, that I think women they have a very great, they have an important role to play here. This is a very male dominated, a male bastion. But I think that, gender perspective also needs to be taken into when we are doing this kind of studies, because it matters a lot. You have to influence the debate. You have to influence the narrative, the discourse, as to how dangerous, things that we are dealing with, and the world can be heading towards a very gloomy picture. It's a very gloomy scenario out there, and we need to, prevent that from happening.
All right. All right, thank you. I will. We have time constraints, so I will take a few questions. But Dr. Kazi, if you be very precise and short in your answer, that it would be great. And I'll save last question for myself. I can see the next person here online is Mr. Rajiv Verma. Rajiv ji, would you like to ask any question? Rajiv ji. Okay, so I'll go to the next person, Mr. Satyabandhu Arya. Mr. Satyabandhu. Okay, Mr. Shahid Iqbal.
No, sir, I have no question, sir.
Okay, Surbhi Mehta. Do you have any question?
So I don't have any question, but thank you so much, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed your lecture.
Thank you, Survi.
Okay, Dr. Kazi, I have a question. So our topic was India's doctrine in Indo-Pacific, but I would like to extend it beyond Indo-Pacific. For example, what I mean by that is now there many countries have developed outer space capabilities, and as you know, that the communication for any country is very critical for its economy, for defense, for many other purposes to run the country as well. And we might face challenges and like threats to our satellite system and communication channels in the outer space. So my question to you is, what is India's capability to protect its assets in outer space? And and what's a policy going forward? I know it's a flexible policy that you mentioned, but do we already have anything in place right now to protect our assets? And do we consider attack on our assets in outer space as attack on India, as far as nuclear attack is concerned?
Well, the short answer, since you asked me to be, short on this, our nuclear doctrine does not really talk about space assets. That's a completely different, area altogether. Given that, that is not within the purview of India's nuclear doctrine. But on the protection of its assets, India is working on it. It has its own satellite imagery technology. It has made a lot of like advancement in that area. But yes, of course, the intelligence aspect of it, it's still an ongoing process. I guess.
I would like to hear your views, because you mentioned that um, we should not go into the race of developing the capabilities. So this is the latest technology, and where the many countries are going towards, and though there is not a direct threat on India's boundaries, or India's as the Indian attack on Indian army in foreign countries, but there are some, would we consider attack on Indian assets outside the globe as attack on India, or should we keep on practicing the non-violence and that kind of practices to not go into that race? So my question is, like, how much relevant the race is actually in this case? Thank you.
Well, honestly, any race which is, like unreasonable and, it is meaningless if it is really, making or imposing on other important aspects, like in terms of economy, in terms of, developing the social sector, the humanitarian requirements, the political process as such. So when you have important imperatives like this, it's like the guns versus butter. But of course, you have to make your choices as a country. And given your status, a country like India cannot really afford to get into any arms race vis-a-vis China, because it's not going to, it's not a prudent, it's not a pragmatic decision. But yes, you're right. Any attack on our assets, whether on the Indian soil or foreign soil, any attack on Indian assets, and as our doctrine also says, but of course, this does not include the space asset. The Indian nuclear doctrine essentially concentrates on the nuclear assets and our force structure as such. But given that point, any attack on our forces, on our assets, will be considered to be an attack, a first strike, and we have our postures clear on that.
All right. We have a last question for you, Dr. Kazi. And this is from Punami Basu. Punami Basuji, would you like to ask yourself, or should I read it for Dr. Kazi? Okay, I think I should read it.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Kazi. It's very nice to speak to you after so long. My question is that, as you have declared the posture, like, as you defined and talked about it, how does this feed into India's great power aspirations right now? In I know that in the non-proliferation order, it's trying to take an active role, so it will increase the stability, and like it's trying to promote the nuclear stability in that way. But on the other hand, it's trying to seek an active role in the Indo-Pacific. So it's also doing like technological development, whether it's a submarine or a missile technology. So how do you see this particular posture of like minimalist posture with credible deterrence, like going in with India's great power aspirations also, which is also trying to do the technological development? Thank you.
Thank you, Ponomi. That was a great question, and I'm glad to reconnect with you. Um, so, if you're India's great power aspirations, but like you cannot really calculate India's great power aspirations from like only from, you cannot see through that through the nuclear prism as such. There are so many other aspects of it. So if you're talking about India's great power aspirations in terms of technological development, in terms of the other aspects, that India's contribution in the non-proliferation regime as such. If I have to structure it within that framework, India's the very fact that India is contributing in terms of its commitment on the FMCT, because that has been as part of the Indo-US nuclear deal, where India has agreed to, like cooperate for the speedy, facilitation on the FMCT. That's a important contribution, which again it also reflects on India, because it shows that India is so much committed as a responsible nation, as a responsible nuclear nation. It is committed for global, nuclear security as such, and also for upholding the non-proliferation regime. Even though we are not part of the, we have not signed the NPT as such, because of there are certain differences on that ground. But nonetheless, that has not really stopped us from upholding the objectives of the NPT. So in that sense, India has a huge role to play. FMCT happens to be one aspect there. The CTBT, that also has huge kind of importance and relevance in this area. India has way back in 1996, India's position was clear that it is our ambassador made it. Ambassador Arundhati Ghosh made it very clear that we are not going to sign it under the conditions. So, and of course, the conditions were that it has to be tied with it in a time-bound manner. It has to be linked with nuclear disarmament. The very fact that India has made its point, even though it was a very soft power approach, very softly, but it made its point very clear that it holds a it's a critical, it's an important component within this non-proliferation regime, where it can make a lot of difference by upholding these objectives. Whether it's CTBT, whether it's FMCT, India has a huge role to play in effecting these measures, and they have important relevance. They have huge relevance within the arms control arena as such. Certainly reflects, India's contribution will certainly reflect its position as a great power.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kazi. I think it's time, um, and I would like to thank Dr. Kazi for her wonderful presentation and disclosure. Adityanji, do you want to say something? I heard
I
something.
enjoyed the lecture from Professor Kazi very much, and I like the interactive participation from our audience. I think we'll have many more sessions, and we'll hope that Professor Kazi will continue to oblige us with her expertise, wisdom, and knowledge in the area of strategic studies. Thank you very much, Professor.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kazi, for this wonderful presentation and your disclosure and answering all these questions in this session. Thank you. And I would like to extend my regards to Dr. Adityanji for his insights into this topic and how brought this discussion meaningful and enjoyable for all of us. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji. And I would also like to extend my thanks to all the listeners and the viewers who encouraged us to host this program. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here. And we are all going through very difficult situations, but I must say, CSA under Dr. Adityanji, you've made this possible for us to gather and have this kind of interaction. This is really helpful for all of us. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.